Welcome to round 10 of NASAT 2018. My name is Ophir, and Chris is over here, scorekeeping. The team on my left is California A, and the team on my right is Tennessee Slate Gray. All right. Here's toss-up one. One of these things is the limit in a procedure that involves minimizing the squared norm of the change in the Jacobian subject to a constraint on how it acts on a certain vector. A theorem about the number of these points looks at how many times successive derivatives of a function flip sign and is named for Boudin and Fourier. Broyden names a higher dimensional method that finds these values. Sums of products of these values appear on one side of Vieta's formulas. A method for approximating these values forms a new...
Okay, it's roots.
Yes. This play ends with Shabutikin singing Tararabundie to himself as Olga says, "If only we knew." Which Poetich named this play about the Prozorov family. It begins on the anniversary of the main character's father's death, which also happens to be Irina's name day.
3 sisters.
At the end of the play, the seagull, this playwright kills himself in the belief that he will never create successful art and that women never forgive failures.
Sure.
No.
It's just
No, it's not.
Answer:
Stanislav.
Konstantin. The Seagull and the Three Sisters were written by this Russian writer who called medicine his lawful wife and literature his mistress.
Chekhov.
20.
Stanislav.
Toss-up 2. Thank you. Phil Nilblock uses these musical effects in his annual winter solstice concerts. Charlemagne Palestine, another minimalist composer who uses these effects, built a spectral continuum machine to synthesize them. The prelude to Das Rheingold uses this effect in the contrabasses, who start playing on E-flat. This musical function is served by a string instrument called a tanpura and by...
like a pedal point?
Prompt.
Like playing the tonal over, like playing the note.
Sorry.
The key.
I'm sorry. No. And by a keyboard attached to a set of bellows called a shruti box in Indian classical music. This effect is created by the burden in a musette or Baroque French bagpipe, and by the outer strings of a hurdy-gurdy. Circular breathing is needed to create this effect on the didgeridoo. For 10 points, name this musical technique of continually sustaining a low note through a piece of music.
Circular breathing.
Drone.
Protest.
Okay. So the first thing you said was pedal point, which I prompted on.
Yeah, right. Then I said like playing the tonal note over and over
Yep.
repeatedly, which is what the tanpura does.
That's like what a drone is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if the rules say follow the description.
Alright,
Yeah,
so
the shruti box is like a drone.
when it matters at the end, we'll write it officially down, but for now I wrote down that you said pedal point, I prompted, then you said playing the tonal note repeatedly.
Yes.
Okay? In that case, the swing is 45.
Yeah.
Toss-up 3. Charles Murray was given his nickname for transporting Obeish to one of these places in London. Hap Halloran was detained naked in one of these places in Ueno during World War II. These institutions were the subject of the Hagenbeck Revolution, which is named for a man who founded one of these institutions in Hamburg. Stamford Raffles and Humphrey Davy helped found one of these institutions at the side of London's Regent's Park. In 1896, a Sioux village was established in one of these places in Cincinnati. The only photo of a quagga was taken in one of these places.
Zoo.
Yes.
Like
Answer the following about understanding how organismal traits evolve. In order to understand how traits evolve, you need to have one of these diagrams that posit a hypothesis about the relationships among species. Joe Felsenstein pioneered maximum likelihood methods for producing them.
Phylogenetic trees.
Okay. Sure. Go.
Phylogenetic trees.
Yes, many simple comparative methods assume a model of trait evolution described by this kind of stochastic process, also called a Wiener process. In this model, trait differences are described by a normal distribution with mean 0 and variance proportional to the time since divergence.
Random walk.
Prompt.
Brownian 2D random walk.
Yeah, 2D random walk.
Prompt.
No answer.
It's Brownian motion.
What?
An important goal is to understand the
Wait,
relationship between trait evolution and diversification, as during these events, in which rapid diversification is accompanied by rapid phenotypic evolution. Darwin's finches were the product of one of these events.
Adaptive radiation.
20.
Nice.
Wait.
We should have compared
Definitely
brownie.
Yeah.
Toss-up 4. In a novel by this author, a group of criminals including Jackie Blue Note, Hamburger Mary, and Sammy the Butcher are pursued by Inspector Lee. This author produced several novels out of a word hoard and incorporated a technique that he learned from the painter Brian Gisson called cut-up. In 1978, this man published a series of essays.
Burroughs?
Yes.
Good job.
This group returned to Greece 3 generations after the Trojan War and conquered all the cities of the Peloponnesus outside of Arcadia. For 10 points each, identify this group of descendants of a Greek hero.
Heracles' kids.
Yes. During the wars of the Heraclides, Hylas cut off the head of this man who had ordered Heracles 12 labors. Eurystheus. After Heracles' great-grandson Hippotes killed the seer Carnus with a javelin, the Heraclides were told to search for a person with this trait in order to regain the god's favor. The quest for a person with this trait was fulfilled when Oxylus was found sitting on a maned horse. Answer.
A blind person.
A being with 3 eyes.
Okay.
10 points. This man claims that his lack of belief and certainty was caused by reading Ivor Eklund's Mathematics of the Unexpected and the ideas of Nobel chemistry laureate Ilya Prigogine. This thinker, who used the economic theory of Kondratiev waves to explain the outbreak of wars, claims that after the climate-driven decline of feudalism, simple two-way relationships of colonizing and colonized countries did not take place. This person advocates the notion of quasi-monopoly as the only possible structure under which capitalist accumulation can occur, and says that there have been 3 hegemonic powers since the Renaissance, beginning with the Netherlands. This theorist advances the notion that the periphery is always dominated by the core in an integrated world economy. For 10 points, name this inventor of world systems theory. Nope.
Wallerstein?
Yes.
Oh my dude.
In 1936, Thomas Hart Benton finished painting murals depicting the social history of Missouri for the Missouri State House. For 10 points each, Benton painted this Kansas City political boss watching a burlesque show. Harry Truman was dubbed the senator from this man because of his prominent role in Truman's early career.
Pendergast?
This man and his brother are depicted with other bandits in a section of the mural. This member of the Bushwhackers was killed by Robert Ford.
Okay, James?
The earliest scene shows a Frenchman trading with a member of this Indian nation. Members of this nation killed Kiowa villagers in the Cutthroat Gap Massacre.
Mohawk.
Osage. 20.
Oh,
Toss-up 6. In an essay titled for this word, Thomas Nagel employs the thought experiment of an adult who has regressed into an infantile state, where happiness consists of a full stomach and a dry diaper. Michel Montaigne wrote an essay which claims that to study philosophy is to learn to do this. A book titled in part for this thing describes the human condition as stuck in the tension between the finite and infinite, and as the relations relating itself to itself in the relation. That book is The Sickness Unto This... Yes. This woman was a co-headliner with her brother Wolfgang in shows where they both performed violin and piano, and she sometimes received top billing during these tours. For 10 points each, name this woman whose compositions have been lost or destroyed, and who was forced to stop performing when she turned 18 in 1769.
Probably like
Mozart's sister.
Okay.
Yeah,
How about we say
Mozart's younger. Mozart's sister.
Mozart.
Brahms.
I said Mozart's sister.
Brahms.
Oh, Mozart's younger sister.
No, we need
No, no,
a
no.
A.
L.
It's Nannerl Mozart.
Do you take N, Mozart?
Yeah. Nannerl was the daughter of this music teacher who worked for the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg and wrote a treatise on the fundamental principles of violin playing. Many musicologists believe that he wrote the Toy Symphony.
Salieri.
Haydn.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Haydn.
No, this is Leopold Mozart. After Wolfgang's death, Nannerl met this woman, her sister-in-law, once in 1820, and decided to give this woman a box of letters from Wolfgang to help write a biography. Mozart wrote the soprano solo in his great C minor mass for this singer.
What singers did Mozart like?
D.
Answer.
Mozart.
This is Aloysia Weber or Maria Mozart.
How much do you get on that bonus of your?
20, I think.
Okay. What?
0
None
points. on
less.
that. I didn't write it. I didn't write that.
It's just his sister, his father, and his wife about Mozart. You know, that's fair.
That's just named 3 letters. That's
So, toss up 7. The Samaritan Book of the Secrets of Moses described Nebaioth's involvement in the creation of this thing. The golden door of repentance opens to a staircase leading to this building's roof. In 1627, a golden waterspout was added to this building, which is cleaned twice a year in a special ceremony and was formally attached to a short semicircular wall. A brocade covering called kiswa is found on this object, whose corner contains a possible meteorite, and which
like the dome of the rock.
no,
Okay.
and which tradition holds was constructed by Ibrahim and Ishmael. Tawaf is the act of circumambulating this building and is performed 7 times during the Hajj. For 10 points, the Qibla is fixed towards what cubic shrine, which is the holiest place in Islam.
Come on.
That was so.
Yeah.
Władysław Reymont names the city's airport because Reymont set his novel The Promised Land in this city and described the rapid growth of its textile industry. For 10 points each, name this city in central Poland, whose population has been overtaken by that of Kraków due to deindustrialization. Its Piotrkowska Street is the longest in Poland.
Warsaw, Gdańsk, Łódź.
Warsaw.
Sure.
It's Łódź. Łódź is the Polish word for this object. One of these things is depicted on Łódź's coat of arms, and this object is also depicted beside a palm tree on the flag of Guam.
Maybe like, no, that doesn't make sense.
It's not
It's probably a star.
Answer?
Star.
It's a boat.
Okay.
In 2017, Łódź hosted games in the group stage of this sports world championship. The sport, which along with soccer is one of Poland's national sports, is played by teams of 6 players, either side of a large net.
Squash.
Is this tennis, squat?
Not tennis.
6 players. Volleyball?
Answer?
Squash.
Volleyball.
Yes. For 10.
Wow. What is squash? Squash is
What the
No, it's not. Squashes with rackets and it's not that.
Yeah.
Toss up 8. One of the original members of this group authored the Modern Corporation and Private Property, a foundational text of U.S. corporate law, and later drafted the Commonwealth Club Address. That man was Adolf Berla. Benjamin Cohen and Thomas Corcoran, 2 later members of this group, were known as Felix Frankfurter's Happy Hot Dogs. New York Times writer James Kieran originally coined the name of this group.
Like the brain trust?
Yes. This man was a target of an assassination attempt by Alexander Panagoulis, who, after being freed from prison, became a member of parliament for 10 points each, named the CIA-linked officer who overthrew King Constantine II in 1967. This dictator led the regime of the colonels until 1974.
No, it's Greece. We're talking about Greece.
Yes, sir.
Metaxas.
No. It's Georgios Papadopoulos. The regime of the colonels ruled this country, where massive demonstrations against the junta occurred at Athens Polytechnic.
Greece.
The junta collapsed after their sponsorship of a coup deposing this ethnarch of Cyprus ended in a Turkish counter-invasion known as Operation Attila.
Macarios?
Yes, for 20. Toss up 9. This character doesn't accompany his friend at a sermon by the Mormon William Hitch on a moving train. Francis Cromartie is unable to convince this character not to spend 2,000 pounds on an elephant, which he insists he needs. Aouda proposes to this character, who had earlier saved her from sacrifice by...
Fog?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
That was prime.
Contemporary English only retains 2 forms of this grammatical category, though it previously had another. For 10 points each, name this grammatical category that marks words for quantity.
Like number. No, it's literally number.
Yeah,
It's
number.
Yes. This grammatical number marks exact pairs of nouns. It was lost in modern Greek and most Slavic languages, but is preserved in Slovenian. It only survives in words for body parts in Welsh and Hebrew.
Dual.
In the Tanoan languages spoken in New Mexico, exemplify this idiosyncratic number system, where nouns are marked for whether or not their number is the expected amount. For example, the noun for 1 or 3 legs is marked, whereas for 2 it is unmarked.
It's like I don't know what it's called. No, it's right.
It's the inverse number, so 20 points.
That's really
Captivating.
Yeah. Toss up 10. The Kosambi mapping function is one popular way to estimate the extent of this effect, as it contains a correction term for certain double events. During a selective sweep, Allele frequencies of nearby polymorphisms can also be altered due to this phenomenon. That effect is genetic hitchhiking. One value used to measure this phenomenon is calculated as a log ratio of recombination fractions of marker and disease loci. Fine mapping in GWA studies typically allow imputation of non-genotyped SNPs thanks to this effect with the tag SNP. T.H. Morgan observed that wing length and eye colors...
Like linkage?
Yes.
It's like,
This character has a spiritual epiphany in the Sabine Hills on a perfectly peaceful day before returning home to help bury the family funerary urns. But I point each name this title protagonist of a philosophical novel by Walter Pater, who becomes a Stoic after being appointed as amanuensis to Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, and Zeno.
Sure.
Zeno.
Marius the Epicurean.
Okay.
The preface to Pater's The Renaissance opens by noting that many attempts have been made to define this term in the abstract. The Ode on a Grecian Urn declares that truth is this thing, and this thing truth.
Beauty.
In the conclusion to The Renaissance, Pater writes that to maintain a hard gem like one of these things is success in life. In Urn Burial, Thomas Browne wrote that life is a pure one of these things, and we live by an invisible sun within us.
Family? Jar. Sun? Family?
Lived.
Answer,
Sky.
flame, 10 points.
Bonus is this one? Really harsh.
At the half, California A 135, Tennessee 75.
yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Sorry, my voice is probably going away, so try to sustain it for this round. Here's toss-up 11. Thought to be present, people substitute the name good brother or backdoor god for their typical designation so as not to upset them. At the end of a celebration for these entities, lanterns are floated
Ancestors.
on water to help them find their way home. The 14th or 15th day of the 7th month is a festival for these beings where food is left out for them and seats are left empty at performances for their entertainment. That festival is called Zhongyuan. Unlike most people, these beings have been afflicted with their condition because of a particularly violent death, or because they are no longer worshipped as ancestors. Britain points name these supernatural beings in Chinese culture that are stuck in the immediate afterlife and afflicted with intense desire for food.
Hungry ancestors?
No.
What?
Hungry
You know-
ghosts?
It's ghosts. It's.
Hungry ghosts.
Wait, hungry ancestors?
I thought you were just gonna say ghosts.
The hungry ancestors was like an
Hey,
answer
right.
line somewhere.
Was
And
it?
they said, I'm gonna protest that. They
Okay.
said intense desire for food,
All right.
but like they're not ancestors anymore. They're just
Gross.
But I.
They are no longer-
It was intensive line. I had another. argument, so I
We'll
feel
go back
like
to
it's
it
a
later.
thing.
Sorry.
All right. You know,
But
Alright.
I'm just gonna buzz
90,
ghosts so I
sorry,
guess
sorry,
anything.
sorry.
It's.
Let's get it.
85.
Oh, yeah, because we didn't name anything. Okay,
This is great.
Toss of 12. This commander's son fed enemy soldiers to Cuban mastiffs after taking control of a campaign upon the death of Charles Leclerc. Axel von Fersen served as aide-de-camp to this commander. This man was the first commander of the Army of the North during the War of the First Coalition. This general's son surrendered to Jacques Dessalines shortly before the declaration of Haitian independence. Forces under this commander camped at Brown University for almost a year due to the British blockade in Narragansett Bay. This man and Nicholas Luckner were the last commanders to be made marshals of France before the French
They Lafayette?
no,
Dang.
Revolution, having served successfully at the Battle of Yorktown.
Uh,
For 10 points, name this general who led the French Expeditionary Force during the Revolutionary War.
Russian mode.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna buzz.
I'm not gonna say.
Though they are now canonized as separate books, these two books' mirrored structures show that they were almost certainly two volumes of a single text. 10 points each. Name these two New Testament books that depict Christ as the Savior of the whole Roman world and document the early church spreading through the empire.
Romans and Julie. Oh, Acts and Romans.
Sure.
Yeah, answer.
Acts and Romans.
Luke and Acts.
Okay.
One of the
Original,
lines
but-
of One of the lines of evidence for the unity of Luke and Acts is the appearance of two men in white robes in the first chapter of Acts. Those men who appear repeatedly throughout Luke are identified in their first appearance during this event atop a mountain as Elijah and Moses.
Oh,
The two witnesses, maybe? I don't know.
it's like when Jesus goes and hangs out with Elijah and Moses.
Answer,
Trans something.
Transfiguration. In Luke, Jesus is surprisingly stoic about his coming crucifixion, unlike his anguish in the other Gospels. Scholars thus believe that the unique, out-of-place verse describing this phenomenon is a later addition to the Gospel.
What? Fucking what is it?
Answer?
Lamentation.
Jesus sweating blood.
Sweating blood.
0 points.
What are these bonuses?
Toss-up 13.
Yeah.
In Known and Strange Things, these places tile a chapter preceded by the essay Natives on the Boat, in which Teju Cole describes attending a dinner party by their creator. A character joins the progressive Arwakas Aryan Association to antagonize the people at one of these places, described as an alien white fortress crowned with a concrete statue of its namesake god. A donkey cart becomes insufficient to transport objects such as a hat rack and dressing table between two of these places, located in the Chase and Greenvale. These serial structures culminate in one located on Sikkim Street in Port of Spain, ultimately freeing the title character from his subordination to the Tulsis. For 10 points,
Houses for Mr. Biswas?
yes.
Yeah, I think that's.
Okay, also,
The largest of these formations was first described in 2013 and is named KBC after its discoverer's initials. 10 points each. Name these regions between filaments, which are the largest structures in the universe. The aforementioned example contains our local cluster, despite containing a relative paucity of matter.
Super
They
cluster.
said spindles already, right?
Yeah.
So
No, they did say spindle.
They said filaments.
Answer?
Spindles.
No, voids.
Oh.
The temperature of the CMB is correlated with the presence of voids and filaments due to the Sachs-Wolf effect. The CMB is a leftover radiation from this event that started the universe.
Not a zero.
Big Bang.
Because the Sachs-Wolf effect doesn't occur if the universe is dominated by matter, it supports the existence of this quantity. This substance explains the accelerating expansion of the universe.
Dark energy.
20.
That is so much easier than these other bonuses.
Toss
Like
up
I could've
14.
gotten points, too.
Romaine Brooks painted an androgynous person with a loose black and white outfit featuring this shape in red on the shoulder in a scene titled For This Shape of France. Ilya Chashnik's suprematism shows this shape laid over a hazy blue burst, and Chashnik's work generally employs this motif, including architectons named for it. Laszlo Moholy-Nagy painted two of these shapes with a large black stripe in a trio of identical acrylic paintings called EM 1, 2, and 3 for telephone pictures. In a surrealist version of a religious scene, Salvador Dali
hypercube.
No.
Cube.
used the net of a tesseract for an object of this shape. Marc Chagall painted a burning synagogue in the upper right of a white version of a scene centered around an object of this shape.
Like a cross.
Yes.
Then Leslie Mahoney now, I should have known this supremacism.
Alright. Your bonus. This man was exiled after the unauthorized Battle of Cabra, which angered Alfonso IV. For 10 points each, name this man who spent around 6 years serving the Moorish leader of Zaragoza, during which he frequently fought such Christian kingdoms as Aragon, and also earned a nickname that probably means the Lord. Despite spending many years working for the Muslims against the Christians, El-Cid is remembered as a hero of this long, sprawling conflict in which Spain overthrew Muslim control. It basically ended in 1492.
Reconquista.
In 1094, while technically working for Alfonso again, El-Cid conquered and ruled this city, where he ran a pluralistic society that granted rights to both Christians and Moors. He was killed defending this city in 1099.
Valencia?
30 points. Right catch?
Oh, do I get?
Yeah, for 30.
Yeah.
Alright, toss up 15. Plutarch paired a ruler. You can open it after, because it makes noise. Plutarch paired a ruler of this city with Numa Pompilius in his Parallel Lives. Strabo describes how men born in this state, known as Parthenioi, were denied property rights and thus left to set up the city of Taras following this city's victor in a war described by Tertius. 28 old men from this city formed the Gerousia Assembly, one of a number...
Sparta?
Yeah. A student housing cooperative at UC Davis is home to 14 cottages consisting only of these structures. 10 points each. Give this type of architectural structure that resembles a semisphere. Baggins and houses at at UC Davis were inspired by the geodesic variation of this structure, popularized by Buckminster Fuller.
Dome.
These architectural structures are used to support a dome over a square or rectangular room by tapering the corners into effective arches. In the Hagia Sophia, these features are decorated with 6-winged seraphim.
I would go buttress. A buttress.
Pendentive.
Oh.
The largest stone dome in the world, unsupported by columns, is the Global Vipassana building of this type near Mumbai. This type of tiered tower inspired C.Y. Lee's design for Taipei 101.
Yoda?
20.
Yeah.
That seems way
It always
stuff
seems
you're
like,
getting.
yeah.
All right, toss up. Let's get a score check after 15.
It is 170 California A, 135 Tennessee.
Oh, really?
Because we felt like
Toss up 16. Llewellyn Thomas and Eugene Wigner both name rotations that result from applying these operations multiple times. In tensor notation, these operations are typically written as a capital lambda with one free index up and down. These operations preserve the scalar product of the electric and magnetic fields.
Lorentz transform.
Yes.
Okay.
I got it. So yeah, but
The basic forward and backward numerical methods of solving a differential equation, both of order 2, are named for this man, for 10 points each. Named this prolific Swiss mathematician, he names the irrational constant beginning 2.71828e.
Euler.
This more technical class of numerical methods can be described using a Butcher table and usually involves weights bi and ci, a matrix aij, and interstitial values ki. The most commonly used form of this doubly eponymous method is order 4.
Runge-Kutta.
Runge-Kutta methods of this type require equations to be solved numerically on each step, since the interstitial values are not directly given as functions of the previous values.
Wait,
Exponential
maybe like Markov?
Okay, Markov chains.
Implicit, 20.
Okay.
Well, I got flex on me like that over here. Just call him Runge-Kutta.
Runge-Kutta.
Also up 17. William Parker donated an unusual green-tinged one of these instruments, nicknamed olive oil, to Henry Grimes, who played this instrument with Alan Silva, in contrasting styles, on Cecil Taylor's Unit Structures. An album by a player of this instrument has tracks including Track A, Solo Dancer. This instrument opens the resolution section and introduces a motif spelled F-A-flat, F-B-flat.
Saxophone.
No. In John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. Paul Chambers played 2 notes on this instrument before the first piano chord on Miles Davis's So What. The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady was released by a player of this instrument who wrote Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. That man is Charles Mingus. For 10 points, name is...
Bass.
Yes.
No, I realized that.
Daniel B. Buick has recorded the Mwindo epic of the Banyanga of Congo. For 10 points each. Mwindo's father tries to kill his son, first by unsuccessfully burying him alive, then by trapping him in one of these objects which is thrown into a river. Several West African myths describe the origin of the djembe kind of these objects.
Drum.
After he journeyed to Bondo to find a way to kill his father, Mwindo was made to grow this crop by Muisa. In a Polynesian myth, Maui hides in a willy willy tree to steal this crop from his grandmother.
So what would be a common crop for both? Yeah, that makes sense. Sugar?
Banana or plantain.
Yeah.
While in the banana grove, Mwindo uses his conga scepter to do this to himself. In the Kalevala, Lemminkainen's mother uses a rake and a honey to do this to her son when he is in Tuonela.
Bring him back to life.
20.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is
Toss up 18. Bobby Campbell was coined the poster boy of this disease. An advocacy group for this disease created a poster of a president with the words "He kills me" underneath and
AIDS.
yes.
Nice. That was so. Yeah, that was so transparent.
Bonus. This writer followed German Sergeant Christian Diestel and 2 American soldiers in his World War II novel The Young Lions. For 10 points each, name this American writer whose short stories include the girls in their summer dresses. Aaron Copland wrote incidental music for his play Quiet City.
No
Answer. Irwin Shaw. Commenting on writers' fear of failure, Shaw said that the ghost of this writer hangs over every American typewriter. This man suffered major commercial failure with a novel narrated by Nick Carraway.
Fitzgerald.
Like Fitzgerald himself, Shaw considered Fitzgerald's best novel to be Tender is the Night, which follows this man's decaying marriage to his former patient Nicole.
Dick.
For 20.
Dick.
Alright, let's get a score check right
It is
now.
195, 195.
Yeah. No question.
19.
I won't make it.
We also need control.
Alright. Where did the...
CCA's running at like.
Now toss up 19. Rosalia Van Beer kills a pet named for this character in Raymond Postgate's Verdict of 12. This character shares his living quarters with a Howdon, who was assumed to be an Anabaptist. This character is last seen drinking from a stream before crossing a plank bridge and running into the bushes. A hymn addressed to this character describes how his thoughts were red thoughts and his teeth were white, and how his enemies called for peace, but he brought them death. Red flowers in their season and scarlet berries in the winter time were offered at the shrine of this character, for whom nutmeg is stolen on special occasions, including once when he is credited with Mrs. de Rop's acute toothache. For 10 points, identify this pole.
Striking Bashtor.
Yes.
Oh, what is the answer?
Striking Bashtor.
This this mural depicts conquistadors wielding a cross like a weapon, and Quetzalcoatl bestowing the wisdom on the Mesoamericans. For 10 points each, name this mural at an American university. It depicts a man gorging himself on gold coins in a group of skeletons in academic attire and amid a bunch of black books.
Okay. Epic of American Civilization.
This other artist created a series of 27 murals of the Detroit industry for the Ford Motor Company. Another mural of his was destroyed by Nelson Rockefeller for containing a portrait of Lenin.
Rivera.
Diego Rivera painted a large mural of the history of this country at its national palace. This country was home to Orozco and Rivera.
Oh no, Mexico. Okay, that was pretty easy.
30.
That was way easier than these other bonuses.
Catch.
Dang.
Catch that.
Wow.
Hey, that shit.
Last toss up.
Don't dig. Don't dig.
Thank you. This culture began the practice of painting porch ceilings paint blue to ward off ghosts. Lorenzo Dow Turner identified hundreds of loanwords in the language of these people, some of whom he found could count in Mendi or Fulani. Generations of women in this community on St. Helena Island are the subject of Julie Dash's film Daughters of the Dust. This American culture, whose chiefess is Queen Quet, retained an unusual amount of African influence due to the low...
Gola?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
This measurement is evaluated on the Pauling scale. For 10 points each, Ning's property that compares the ability of atoms to attract electrons
Electronegativity.
is related to this other property of individual atoms, which indicates the difference between an atom's number of valence electrons and the number of electrons assigned to it in a bond.
Formal charge? Yeah. Formal charge.
Oxidation state. According to the Pauling scale, this element is only slightly more electronegative than cesium. This element was discovered by Marguerite Perret.
Francium, probably? Okay, francium.
20
That's
points.
such a lazy hard part.
That is a really lazy hard part.
Alright, 265, 195.